We remain. No time shall pass, no secrets shall remain, no night shall fall, no day shall begin. Begin without the sun pointed at your heart. Begin without the meeting of soft white pebbles, motionless and solid, yet transformative still. My rock, my stone, my ancient temple of remembering, open untold and shadowed stories of remembrance. You were born at the intersection of revolution and defiance. The lines and the arches of your back and in the curves of your feet speak lifetimes of triumph, speak songs of joy. As you enter, I begin. As I begin, you continue. And in this lake of urban forgiving, we renew once more that sacred hoop of sustenance, where hearts cross, where paths intertwine, and where our journeys continue. Yitol Wihoki Sakus, greetings, good morning, relatives. Thank you for inviting me here. I greet you in the Ishak language. My name is Dr. Andrew Jolivette, Louisiana Creole from the Attakapaw Ishak Nation of Southwest Louisiana, from the Tisakip Huron Opelousas clan of the Sunrise People. I'm speaking from unceded Kumeyaay territory in San Diego, California, as you know. Please feel free to share in the chat what territory you are viewing from today and acknowledge the indigenous tribal peoples where you are, whose land you are standing on. I've actually put if you don't know, I've put a link in the chat so you can actually look up where you are viewing from in the world. I also want to acknowledge the labor of indigenous African peoples whose forced and unpaid labor made it possible to build this country that benefits so many today. We remain, as the poem I opened with suggests, we remain despite so many challenges that face us, whether it's the current situation with COVID-19 or the long history of racism in this country that has not been dealt with yet or fully addressed, particularly for descendants of American Indian and African peoples. So who have been erased in many of the stories and chapters of United States history. My own journey to graduate school and to become a college professor wasn't easy or a planned journey. I never actually planned to even become a professor. I was born in San Francisco to an African American, Native American mother with some European ancestry, and to a Louisiana Creole father of mostly European ancestry, Opelousas, Attakapaw Ishak, indigenous ancestry, as well as West African, French, Spanish, Italian, and Irish ancestry. Growing up, my identification changed from Black/American Indian to Louisiana Creole when I reached the age of about 22 years of age. I think graduate school had a lot to do with me coming to terms with my racial and ethnic identity over time. Being in academia has often meant, quote unquote, fitting everywhere, but then sometimes fitting nowhere, because some colleagues or students see me as fitting across a range of, quote unquote, monoracial categories, including African American, Native American, Latinx, or queer, two-spirit. I will say about some of these terms, right, when we get down to them, grad school is about asking important questions. And so for me, it became a place where I could ask important questions. It doesn't matter if you're in biology, chemistry, engineering, theater and dance, ethnic studies, any social science, humanities, medicine, that you're going to be asking important questions, right? And so my research, teaching, and community work has been driven by my experiences as a multiracial person. Whether I was asking or taking on questions of theory, politics, public health, or research methodologies, I have always inserted a multiracial analysis because it has been so lacking in most academic disciplines. You're going to be applying things in your disciplines that you see that are lacking, that haven't been addressed. And I have over, my 20-year career been asked to speak at events, conferences, rallies, things like this in places like the US or Canada, the Netherlands, Australia, et cetera, precisely because of my multiracial background. And I don't think I would change anything about the experiences and challenges I have faced in academia or in community settings. It has made me a better scholar and activist. My elementary and high school years included many examples of external pressures to identify with certain groups that caused me to have a sense of dissonance, right? Not really understanding where I fit in, and group disassociation. When I was in the first grade at my Catholic elementary school, I can recall a friend's mother asking me if my father was Hispanic or Native American. I said, I don't know. I think so. I mean, I was about 5 or 6. I also assumed, it was assumed by most people that I was biracial, mixed with a black and white, as a black white person, right? Having a white father and a black mother by elementary school teachers. I can recall in the 6th grade, for example, when talking about Puerto Rico and colonialism and mulatto identity, which is a whole other thing we won't have time to get into today. Um, but one of the nuns that was teaching our class that year, she had done work. She was a member of the Daughters of Charity. And she said, oh yeah, they have a lot of mulatto people in Puerto Rico. And then she says, quote, and we have 2 of them in our class right here. But I was left wondering, why was she including me, since I wasn't sure if this was how I should even be identified at that time. I knew I was mixed, but I didn't think of myself as biracial as much as I thought of Creoles, and other mixed or multiracial, multi-generationally mixed race folks like myself. The questions about my ethnic background growing up led me to eventually wonder how any person could possibly contain so many identities without one becoming more prominent over the others. I didn't really believe it possible to be both black and white, to be Native and European, let alone all of those things. But college changed that. In 1993, after I graduated from a predominantly white Catholic high school in San Francisco, I passed over several of the quote unquote better schools, right? This language that we use to define, in this country what we talk about as a meritocracy, right? That everything is equal. Everything we know is not equal. Some of you are going to have to work really hard, and you may see people who aren't working as hard as you getting by faster in that journey. That's one of the challenges. So places like UC Santa Barbara, LSU, I said, yeah, I'm not going there. DePaul, not going there. And instead, I attended a historically black college in HBCU, Lincoln University, which is in Oxford, Pennsylvania. And there was a big part of me that wanted to go to a UC school like some of my peers. And there was another part of me that got excited about attending LSU, and learning more about the Creole experience and people from Louisiana. But I chose to look at American Indian tribal colleges, and historically black colleges and universities to get a stronger connection to my, either my tribal indigenous identity or my black identity. Most tribal colleges offer 2-year programs, so I opted for Lincoln University, which was a 4-year program. It was a culture shock, to say the least. What was interesting was living in the dorms, all male, where I met individuals from across the African diaspora. It was really powerful to meet Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, West and East Africans, Jamaicans, and others who looked like me. I wasn't this anomaly. I think this is because the experiences of many members of the African diaspora are experiences filled with miscegenation or cultural blending, as well as colonial violence against Black and Indigenous bodies. However, we also, as people of African descent in the Americas, have had relationships based on love and free choice, especially in relationships with Indigenous peoples in North, Central, and South America, as well as in the Caribbean. Despite being elected freshman class president, I did not like Lincoln. I didn't like Lincoln University because of its remote location. It was surrounded by a cornfield, in Amish country, and it was just very rural. It was very quiet, and I was a city kid, and it just wasn't fitting for me. I wouldn't change the fact that I attended Lincoln, though, for anything. And I think it was a really important experience. And whatever you do, I want to say that your journey is where you end up, is where you're meant to be. You being here today, getting the information that you will, is going to be a part of what make your decisions about where you go, right? There's so many different things I could say. Oh, my life would be so different. Would I even be living in California if I had stayed at Lincoln University? But I was also frustrated at that school. 50% of my professors were white, and this is a historically Black college. So I thought that that was also, a challenge. I was also concerned that, this didn't seem like the journey that fit for me. So I transferred to the City College of San Francisco. And then, though I swore I would never go back to Catholic school again, growing up very Catholic and having gone for K through 12, basically, or first through 12, I did end up going to the University of San Francisco, a private Jesuit college. And I chose USF because of the small class size, because I knew I could get my classes and graduate in a timely fashion. I studied with mixed race studies scholar Rebecca Chioko King Orion. And it was the first time I took a course that really spoke to my experience. It was called People of Mixed Descent. And I think in taking that class, right, that really shifted. I was an English literature major initially, a double major in English and Spanish. But after I took a sociology class, I shifted what I wanted. And so I think graduate school is about, like I said, asking these questions. Different things take you different places in terms of your um, journey. And so I continued in that People of Mixed Descent class. I wrote a senior thesis that then I took that topic into graduate school at San Francisco State, where I got a master's degree. And even for my PhD, which I did at UC Santa Cruz in sociology, I continued on this topic of looking at racially mixed people, particularly what would become my first single authored manuscript, Louisiana Creoles, Culture Recovery and Mixed Race Native American Identity. I argued that incorporating a cultural formation analysis into racial formation would help to take into account these variations in identity that are not only experienced by those who identify as multiracial, but also for many monoracially identified peoples as well. But none of this was supposed to happen. I had planned to go to law school after USF, but then I taught in a summer program called Summer Bridge, where I was able to teach ethnic studies and women's studies to fifth and sixth graders. I loved it. They were some of the smart 10, 11 years old, and they were so excited. And I said, I really want to do this. And so I quickly changed my mind, just like as a junior, I changed my major in undergrad. I changed my mind about going to law school and applied to a couple grad schools and um, got in and eventually went on to study my PhD. But I also wasn't supposed to be here because there were a lot of challenges along the way. Things like where you're experiencing now with COVID and other challenges, racial unrest in the country, right? I was facing challenges then too, where I shouldn't be in front of you today. And I remember it was October. It was 2002. I was the dean of middle school students and multicultural programs at Presidio Hill School in San Francisco. I was also lecturing and teaching my first graduate course at San Francisco State University. That was pretty busy, right? And then I was also in the final stages of writing my dissertation at UC Santa Cruz. I can remember quite clearly the walk up the hill from the park with the teachers and students at Presidio Hill. I couldn't breathe. My conditions quickly worsened, and I had had a cough for several months that just wouldn't go away. I went to stay with my parents because I was feeling that sick. I did see a doctor who, though, thought it was a bad case of asthma, but he said, here, take this inhaler. We're going to take some X-rays, and he said he would call in a few days if anything showed up. 3 days later, no call. My breathing was worse, and finally, at the pleading of my parents, I agreed to let my sister take me to the ER. My oxygen level was 87 instead of 100. My fever was 102 or 103. They did more x-rays, and it was the next morning that changed my life. A doctor walked in and asked me to shut the TV off. He said, "You have AIDS, you have pneumonia, and it's on the front and back of your lungs. Something we only see in people over the age of 65. I was 26 at the time. And in people with advanced HIV or AIDS. I asked him for my T cell count. He said, you have 35 T cells. Anything below 200, and the normal range I should say is really about 500 to 1800, but anything below 200, he said, is an AIDS diagnosis. And the closer you are to death, the lower that number will be because you can't fight infections. He says, we need to run more tests because we think you have an opportunistic infection or opportunistic form of pneumonia. And he also told me that my viral load, which they also measure how much the virus is in your bloodstream, was 500,000. The closer you are to 1 million, the closer you are to death. So I was very, very sick. I didn't think I would live. And so in those moments immediately after I felt really sick or emptiness in my stomach, then my ears were ringing, it was quiet in the room, and I cried for a bit, and I said, I can't die now. What about my students? What about my parents and my family? I have to finish this PhD first if I'm going to die. Looking back, I had a common response that I think a lot of people have. I used to teach a course at San Francisco State, People of Color and AIDS, and I, wouldn't share my diagnosis with the students until maybe midway through the semester. And then some of them would come back and say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," because I'd ask them questions like, "What would you do if you found out you were HIV positive?" And many of them say, "Oh, like their life would be over." And I just want to acknowledge that, yes, I think with illness, anything, right? We saw that with Chadwick Boseman, for example, colorectal cancer, all these things that some of you will be studying and trying to address and deal with. And, what I learned over time is that AIDS isn't me. When people have cancer, they don't say, "I am cancer," right? So in these past 18 years since that diagnosis, I think back on all the stories I've shared, with you, whether those were challenges of racial identification, being called every racial epithet you can kind of think about, and other blockades to higher education, feeling like you're not worthy to be in those halls and spaces. But now, as a full professor, right, with tenure, it's interesting to think about the responsibility that comes with that too. Only 3% of full professors of African descent, African American descent, 3% of them, right? So the 97% are not black, right? American Indians, less than 1%, less than half of a percentage point, and then Latinx around 2%. And when you look at this based on gender, the numbers are often even lower within those specific groups. And so it's really important the work that you all are doing, the struggles of working within a colonial institution. They still exist, right? Discrimination, pay disparities, and yet you are here to can make so much incredible change. I feel so fortunate. Today I'm undetectable in terms of viral load. I have over 1,200 T cells. I've authored, many books and done a lot of community work, and I feel fortunate to have and privileged, but I also feel like I've kept up the responsibility to go back into my communities and serve them well. So whether you are studying in the sciences, arts, humanities, or education, your voice matters. It really matters. And I encourage you all to think of graduate school not just as work or a career or for career advancement. Think of graduate school, think of it as ceremony. When I was diagnosed with AIDS, my good friend and Dene, Navajo medicine man, Daniel Freeland, told me during a ceremony some friends held for me, he said, quote, "Andrew, you can't think of yourself as sick. And when you share your story and do good work, you are helping your brothers and sisters. You become medicine. And so do your brothers and sisters, the people you know." And so, there were so many, messages, and there's, so much of my hope, um, like the hope that I got. So my hope for all of you today is that wherever your journeys take you and whatever challenges you may face along the way, may you always be medicine to yourself, to your families, and to your communities. May you create ceremony in the work that you do on your graduate journeys, wherever they take you. And I hope they will bring you here to UC San Diego. As a multiracial Creole, Indigenous, Afro-Latin academic, my academic life and career has been filled with a variety of experiences, challenges, and plenty of joy as well. I strive to incorporate my community work with my research and teaching. To be completely honest, I don't understand how any person of color or any Indigenous person can separate or divorce their academic work from their community organizing work or just their community work, period. We have a responsibility to be in dialogue with living and breathing communities and not just with the past or literary sources. We must make sure that our research and teaching and our studies, the methods we use, are reflective of the communities that we come from, and not just from the settler societies that can shape our career trajectories. As a critical mixed race studies scholar, most of my writing and community work revolves around multiraciality, as I've shared with you this morning, and the complexities of these types of identities. So, in my 20-year career, I've come to see, even more change, right, in terms of student demographics. Multiracial people are the fastest growing group under the age of 18 in the state of California. And this is happening across the United States. It forces us to ask different kinds of questions in a number of fields. And if we don't ask these questions, right, um, then we'll have issues in the future, I think. And so this does not mean that racism, that we should, kind of continue to link. A lot of people say, oh, mixed race identity will be the end of racism. It really won't, right? So what can I say to you as I wrap up here, the future generation of scholars who will come after me? Long after I am gone, I wish you love. I wish you joy. It is my wish that you will not have to feel like your back is a bridge between communities, at least not in a way that is not of your own choosing. I hope that you will be able to center without hesitation the knowledge systems of your peoples without facing questions about the legitimacy of your intellectual traditions. But please hear me now. Be your own best self advocate. Learn the system. Publish and publish and publish. You can write for your own people and your own audience and in ways that feel most authentic and meaningful to you. Be proactive, not reactive. Be confident and be humble. Recognize your full humanity and know that every single one of the challenges you might face or the choices you make along that journey, like the challenges and choices I made along mine, everything you write, everything you create, these are indeed a gift. You are a gift from Creator. So don't let anyone rattle you. Life is short, so write it and research it and do it anyway. You are responsible for the world you leave behind in small and in big ways. You know the difference. You are a legacy. Your work is meant to be ceremony. When you work with this purpose, your path will always be full. Iweo Mezi, thank you, and my best wishes to each and every one of you.